Hey guys, it's John and Jackie of OpenLove101.com. Welcome to our show. And today we have an amazing guest. It's Laura Brim. She's an author, and I'm going to let her tell a little bit about herself. Hi, Lauren.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. Yeah, my name is Dr. Lauren Brim. I am a sexologist, a doctor of sex, and I've written numerous books. I have a practice here in Los Angeles where I coach couples and singles around sexuality. And I'm also the founder of the Adult Playmat, which helps take the work out of messy sex. So I'm happy to be here and have a fun conversation with you today.
So, Lauren, that's a great idea, that product. You know, so many couples that we coach or see in our clubs, definitely there can be issues sometimes. So, how did you come up with that idea?
Just being a human who enjoys sexuality and being a woman and you menstruate every month and just trying to come up with some way to I'm all about efficiency and getting the things done I need to get done so I can have more pleasure and more fun, and having something you can put on the bed that you can just wash under the sink or wipe clean, as opposed to, throwing that old towel down that you have like in the back of the closet, or washing some big elaborate period blanket or something like that. This is
Yes.
just really simple. You literally wash it under the sink, throw it back under the bed, and it's done. And, there's this whole concept of the second shift for women, that women often take on more of the household responsibilities. And so I found that this was one of those places where women end up being the ones to like wash the towels and change the sheets. And
Oh,
then
so
sex is
true.
even more work for us. So, if you want women to have sex while they're menstruating, or not be afraid to really let go and squirt or let whatever, go on during sex, you have, for a lot of women, they're going to, maybe not participate in that if to them it's another thing they have to add to their to-do list, to change the sheets and do another load of laundry and whatnot. So that's
That's
why I created it, and it's a lot of fun.
and if someone wanted to buy one, how would they find it?
On Amazon.
Okay. Oh, cool. That's great.
Yeah, good old Amazon.
Can you hold it up again and show? I mean, is it like a yoga mat, or I mean,
It's
is it
like a
thick?
mini yoga mat. So yeah, you can roll it up. No one knows that you're walking around with a sex mat, but it's just long enough to sort of fit under your butt or under your partner's butt. You can put it to the side if you had wider hips. You can also put it under a really sweaty partner who, maybe sweats all over your bed. This is a very
Oh,
nice
Yes.
application. And then it's made of the same material that yoga mats are made from. So they don't collect bacteria or anything like that. You just wash it under the sink. It dries in a few minutes, and then you just roll it back up and put it under the bed. Or you can take it to a hotel if you're having like a fun, sexy getaway weekend and you might be menstruating that weekend, or, not want to have to call, the maid to come clean the room or whatnot. It's very helpful for that too.
I don't know, I might be showing my age when I make this comment, but, I see the mat and I thought about, like the squirting, just the fluid. I wasn't even thinking about menstruating and what a mess that is. I mean, it really is, it is messy. And if you have something that's containable, that can really be a vessel to kind of hold that, because at times that can be quite a bit. That's phenomenal. I mean, I wish I'd have had that. In fact, I don't have to worry about it
I
anymore. But
I know. Well, one of the surprising things when we started selling it is, I thought, oh, women are going to buy this because women have to do the work to clean up period sex. And what we found was so many men buying it for their partners, and,
yes,
encouraging their partners like, hey, those 5 to 7 days out of the month when you bleed, and some women bleed longer,
right.
we have this so that we can lay it down. And it kind of also takes that sort of awkward conversation sometimes, maybe with a new partner, about, like, oh, by the way, I'm on my period. It sort of becomes like, I need to grab the mat. Let me grab the mat. And
yeah,
then
no
it's just
problem.
sort
I
of
got it in the trunk of my
understood.
car. I'll be right back.
Well, and it takes away the stigma from that, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of women can grow up thinking that that's a time frame within a month, that's not some, that they can't participate in sex if they're on their period. And so if we start making products that introduce like, yeah, you absolutely can, and this is one way that you can, it's going to be a helpful product and something useful. And I mean, it changes that dynamic, which I think is so important, because you can be super self-conscious about that because, it is messy. It may feel kind of interesting. And I know in some of my past relationships, that wasn't something that my partner was even interested in. Now, fortunately, I'm in a relationship now that, John, he doesn't care, so that
and
was...
most men don't.
Yes.
Most men don't care if women are menstruating. And you're right. Women need not only oh, well, it's okay. But no, not only is it okay, some women have their best orgasms while they're menstruating because everything's so open and there's this extra lubrication. And so, yeah, having a product like the playmat, there's also a product that exists now that you can put inside of you that blocks the cervix. Yeah. But for some women, they might not want to put something inside of them or have that. I mean, you could technically use both if you had like a heavy flow day. So yeah, it's subconsciously is very permission giving to women that there's nothing wrong with having sex on your period. And, this product exists to make it even more pleasurable and keep you from like scrubbing blood out of the sheets or having to change all the bedding after sex, which, can sometimes be funny with a new partner, but I think we'd be much happier to just lie in bed and enjoy or whatnot.
And why is that? Do you think that women, because there definitely is a stigma about that from the women's point of view about not having sex. I don't think it's only about the mess. To me, it feels like there have been times where, oh no, I don't do it when I'm on my period. It's more about the way they were taught. Yeah,
almost from a hygiene standpoint, like, oh, I can't have sex when I'm on my period. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that, even from a safety standpoint? Like, because you're saying it's perfectly fine to have sex during your period.
And it's also about sex education, I think, because, people, we're not really taught, I don't think, as young people that this is normal and it would be okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I think like most things with sex, the sort of prohibition around period sex or women's hesitancy is more about the shame of bleeding, the lack of talking about it. I mean, so many women start bleeding and their mothers never give them any information about it. So it's all sort of, this thing we think we have to hide from not only men, but the world. And, we assume that men are going to be put off by the smell of blood or, the appearance of it or whatnot. But, the cervix is more open to release the contents of the uterus that you're releasing with menstruation. So there is a, tiny higher risk of something getting into the uterus with sex. But as I think we're going to talk later about, sex is, if your body is healthy, it's actually very low risk. And our sex education is mostly fear-based. You could get all these diseases. Sex could leave you with, these horrible warts or these horrible wounds and, ultimately, death. And so, that's really the only message we get about it when in fact, if our immune systems are healthy, sex is a very safe thing we can partake in.
Well, I mean, I don't know if we need much more of an introduction to our next topic than that, because, when we had kind of been throwing around topics to talk about, and when you said, that sex education is something that you felt like would be a great topic, I couldn't agree more. It's interesting, even just doing my own brief research into sex education, one in the States, which, I think we all know that it's decided state by state. So depending on where you live could depend on what kind of sex education that you're taught. And then if you take a look at how sex education is taught in Europe and a lot of the other countries, it can be as wide ranging as it is here in the States. But you're right. I mean, I think a lot of the sex education or the base of a lot of sex education is kind of this fear-based or this abstinence-based instead of like, let's give people information and let them do with it what they feel like needs to be done instead of keeping them in the dark. So I can't wait to talk about this. I mean, what are your thoughts on sex education?
Well, the first thought that always comes to me around sex education is this idea that sort of trending on social media for a while that in the Netherlands, sex education was a balance of pleasure and responsibility. And I think that so beautifully captures what people need with sex. They need to understand the responsibility of consent, of, respecting their own, yes and no, their own intuition. They need to understand how to use condoms. They need to understand how to prevent pregnancy. There's the whole responsibility aspect, both I think emotionally and physically, but then there's the pleasure aspect. And we know from research that if we're not given names for our genitals, if we're not taught the capacity that we have for pleasure, that we actually don't achieve those things. It's sort of like anything else in life. If you live with this concept that you can only make so much money, or you can only, live in a certain way, that's how you will live. And so with sex, it's the same thing. And we often find that as you give someone a little bit of information, I had a conversation with a woman the other day, and she said, very next day, she's like, I gave myself the best orgasm of my life just based on, we were on a call for 15 minutes setting up an event, and she's not a sexually repressed person in any way. So this is the power of information and education that everyone should have access to.
I couldn't agree more. Because, here's the thing. I may want to learn about something. It doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to do something, but I at least want to have the option of knowing, right? And so I think this premise that the more information that we give someone about their sexuality, the more open they are to some kind of danger from this mass amount of information, instead of them being informed. The thought that we would want to keep our children naive to something that's going to be a massive part of their life is a disservice. Just to say, well, don't do it. It was like, well, what am I not doing? I don't even know what it is I'm not doing. Like, I know nothing. I don't have anything to base anything off of. And so, I know even just in my own life, there was no conversation at my house about that, So it was either what my friends knew, or what my friends knew.
Yeah. We get the majority of our sexual scripts come from film. And so, it's interesting because now there's more sex than there ever was before on television, and, masturbation and same sex and, things outside of the sort of penis and vagina or vanilla sex model. So this next generation, it's going to be really interesting to see, with all these and consent as a part of the sexual script. And, they're going to have a really different experience than we had. But still, we can't wait for, rated R movies when we get into our teens to teach us about sex. What I think you're referencing is this idea of comprehensive sex education in schools. And a lot of people are really freaked out about that, either because they have this, old-fashioned or incorrect notion that if you teach kids about sex, they're more likely to have sex, which it's actually the opposite is true, that, the more informed you are, the longer you'll wait, and you'll choose to have it in a really conscious and safer way. And the other thing is that they're afraid that sex education is going to be, giving children permission to be homosexual or be bisexual, or I think, I always love when I hear this idea that they're teaching them about anal sex in school. Like, if we teach about homosexuality, then everyone's going to ask, well, where does the penis go? And then, there's just going to be, it's so funny how much fear they have about it. Yet we know that kids that are raised in same-sex families where their parents are same-sex, often the majority of the time they identify as heterosexual. So there's clearly not this automatic, transmission, and people are going to be who they're going to be. And those people who are identifying that way, who feel like there's no one out there that they can relate to and something's completely wrong with them, and are more prone to commit suicide and suffer from depression, sex education in schools is going to help that population and create a healthier environment for us all to live in. So, but I get why people fight it, because they're scared and they're misinformed. And it's unfortunate because sex education also leads to less women needing abortions. And, just it protects us from so many traumas down the line, including the trauma of being in a really unhappy relationship, which is a very real trauma too, where, you can't have orgasms with sex and you're trying to come up with excuses not to have sex with your partner. And that can be the man or the woman, hiding from their partner and really unhappy. So yeah, there's so much we could do if we just started having those conversations really early.
Well, and I think we miss an important component when we talk about sex education, because I think most of us, we automatically go to the physicality of what those lessons would be, right? And we don't touch on the emotional side of our sexuality. And so, like you said, we've got a lot of people out there that, yes, I can teach you A, B, C, D about, how this penis goes into this space or hole, and I can give you all of this technical outline about how sex happens, but we're not talking about what then's happening emotionally when all this is going on, and how it's affecting us, and how we view ourselves, and how we view our own sexuality, or how we view our partner's sexuality. And so there's a missing component to that, with having a healthy view of our own sexuality. So with all of that in mind, I mean, if you could wave a magic wand and have sex education presented to school systems in a way that you would feel would be healthy, what would that look like?
I would wave my magic wand and have the comprehensive model be in all schools in all countries around the world, which starts with learning the boundaries of your own body, learning about consent, learning about communication and relationships, finding your yes, finding your no, and understanding your development, menstruation, puberty, all of that, and continuing on up to a conversation about, pleasure and, again, consent, boundaries, assault, all these things that, we need education about. And then for adults, I think, adults shouldn't just assume they're going to, they have sex figured out and they should just, have the same sex they've always had with their partner. We can continue learning as adults through, I just was reading a textbook the other day and the term bibliotherapy came up, and I was like, yes, it's book therapy, the therapy that we get from self-help books and learning from reading, and it's something we all have access to on Audible and and podcasts like this today. This is a way to expand your sex education
and coaching,
so we should
like they do
never
too.
stop learning.
Yeah, no, we agree, and coaching I think as well. And it's amazing how many couples we coach and how we really talk about boundaries and knowing your yes and no, especially in our viewers, which many of them are in open relationships or in the swinger lifestyle, and that's something new to them. Whereas I'm with you, it just seems like that should be something that would be taught at a younger age. Everything I learned, everything's sexually about the act. I mean, we grew up in Kansas, and so we had the scientific, the drawings of the cartoon penis and the cartoon vagina, and that was about it. And something shooting out at some point. That's what I knew about sex. I learned from older women that were, I was a teenager, but I was learning from women that were in their 20s. And then I remember I'd moved away from Kansas to Tampa, Florida, and I started having I was very active sexually. I started having an itch, and it went on for 3 weeks. I thought it was my bleach. I didn't know, I'm like, what is this? And finally I saw something, and I called my stepdad after 3 weeks. This is why sex education is so important. And I'm like, Dad, this is what's going on here. He's like, John, you got crabs. I'm like, what? What are crabs? Like, this is a live animal on me? He says, look at it on the paper. And I did. And I was like, oh my God, unbelievable. Why in the world would we expect as humans to have to wait until that experience to actually have it, when if I had known, maybe I could have prevented the spread of it. But I had no idea. We're so ignorant to that kind of thing. Wouldn't you think? Don't you agree?
Yeah, I mean, I think that even if taught about sexually transmitted or infections, or we have often, someone might have a concern, their ability to access healthcare in an affordable way might be impacted. The shame of, with everything that I knew about STIs, the first time I got chlamydia. I mean, I sat in the Planned Parenthood office and they had to put me in another room, and I just like wept and wept and wept. And I was
Oh,
like, so this is what it feels like, but it was an important experience because, if you don't have these experiences, then you're just all talk and someone's like, oh yeah, I had, I got this STI or that, and you go, oh yeah, it's okay. But when you've actually experienced it and you're like, I get it. I felt the weight of the shame or the fear or whatever. And then I got through the other side and you realize like, oh, these things are all treatable, and they're preventable if you use condoms for the most part. And a lot of what I think more what we have to work through than the physical discomfort, or is the emotional, like calling your partners up and being like, this happened.
yes.
But yeah, education will prevent a lot. But I think if anything, our education, when they do teach about it, they make it so scary, and then they make people very anxious. And I've also seen the opposite, where someone has one little bump on their genitals and they're like running to the doctor, freaking out. And it's like, calm down. Like the skin also gets bumps, and things happen. And this our skin is our largest organ, so it's often can be detoxing things out, and stuff happens, and it's not always like end of the world situation. So I think again, there's a balance of, these are things to look out for. This is how you prevent having to encounter some of these things. And if you have it, it's not the end of the world. Like the body can heal, and antibiotics might help with that, or an antiviral might calm something down that's active. But the body really is the healer, and if you take care of it, it has so many layers of protection to protect you from contracting chlamydia or gonorrhea or something like that.
Right.
Well, and we don't help it any, like you said, when the way we're teaching sex education today, with all this fear base, then there's this kind of like sex is / bad, right? So nobody's going to be voluntarily, announcing that they have these things because the stigma around it. I mean, unless you don't know. It's funny. I got chlamydia one time in my life, but I didn't know. I didn't know it was I'm telling everybody I have chlamydia. I have chlamydia, but I'm thinking it's just this like fancy named thing that I have. I mean, I don't know. I must be like so naive. And it's never dawning on me that I have no idea what all the people I told were saying about me. Afterwards,
you're like, I got chlamydia.
I have chlamydia. But I'm taking this antibiotic. I'm just thinking it's a virus, just like, or a bacterial thing, just like anything else. I wasn't labeling it as something.
Did you know it was transmitted through sex, or?
No, I knew nothing about it. That's what I'm saying. I'm just telling people that, well, I finally got the results back of what I've had, and I have this thing, it's called chlamydia. And I'm not thinking anybody else is like, oh, wow, well, Jackie, you have this thing. But I mean, I guess to my benefit, that's pretty awesome, because I'm not thinking it's anything negative or dirty. I'm thinking that it's just something that my body's caught and it's fighting, and I knew I could take this antibiotic and it would go away, and then I would be okay. And so it is unfortunate, that you're crying in a room because you have this thing that's completely treatable, just like any of the other bacterial or viral things like that we get. Yes, but we want to. Yeah, but we want to like classify certain viruses as being like really nasty. I mean, even if other ones are way more deadly, I mean, we'll still look bad on somebody if they have herpes or chlamydia or crabs, or like somehow they're really promiscuous, and being promiscuous is something that's negative. But then we don't want to do anything to counter it by, well, then let's teach people what this stuff is so that at least they will know and they can make an informed choice. No, we don't want people to have an informed choice. We just want them to do what we tell them. Well, I mean, that just seems crazy. I mean, we're not going to, how are we going to have these conversations, these honest conversations, if we're not giving anybody the information?
Yeah, and people, if people were more open, like you were just sharing about, like, oh, I got chlamydia, then it becomes just a normal thing. But what you were saying is, yes, it's linked up with, oh, someone who got this STI is doing high risk activities, having sex with multiple partners, and so like that's where all of the stigma and the shame is supposed to be on the person who's doing that. Well, if you were in a monogamous relationship, then you wouldn't have that. So therefore, you're put in that category. And it's one of, speaking of sex education, I created a course just for healthcare practitioners, and I'm currently creating another one, because you'd be shocked that the people that are providing the healthcare, when you go in to say, hey, do I have an STI, or to get your PAP, or to see your midwife when you're pregnant or whatnot, they have so little education about sexuality, like maybe 12 hours in school. And that was, actually why I got into to studying human sexuality, as I was training to be a midwife, and I saw that women were coming after they'd given birth to, and they have questions about sex, and where did my libido go, or why is this and that, and the midwife really had no information, and the OBGYNs are sort of uncomfortable with it. And to really provide accurate sex education and information to patients, you need to understand the sex practices of homosexuals, of bisexuals, of people in open relationships, of what is the full spectrum of sexual experience after giving birth. It's not just, oh yeah, no, you're not going to feel like having sex for a long time after you have a baby. Well, what if you feel like having sex the day after you had a baby?
Right.
Like, is something wrong with you? We need to, like, they need more education too. And a lot of people get very traumatized in the doctor's office because of, this lack of information the doctor has to be able to just have comfortable conversations around sex. And that's why I think, things like this podcast, and hearing people talk about sex that don't have, we probably did at some point have our hangups, right? But like, we've worked through them, and then people go, wow, you're so comfortable with the subject. That's what it should be like in the doctor's office, and with the therapist and with your friends, because we're all talking about the things that go great in our sex lives, the things that don't go so great, infections we had, and what the solutions were, and whatnot.
Well, and how to even embrace our sexuality, right? So that's so much a part of sex education too. And I know, at least for me as a woman, I had a really hard time connecting with that. Orgasm, what the heck was that? I mean, I came from an age where I was supposed to be focused on my partner's orgasm, but I was so out of touch with my own, I didn't even know what that looked like. And so then you start to think, like you said, that there's something wrong with you. And so then as an adult, I'm trying to play catch up. I'm this grown up, but I know so little about what this great opportunity I have to be sexual. So.
And I'd like to, when we come back, I'd like to talk about how women can feel, and men do too. Men feel shame about their sexuality, or about sex. Let's come back and talk to that in a moment. But first, let's get a message from our sponsor. Hey guys, thanks for watching our videos and listening to our podcasts. We hope that you're enjoying our show. But do you want something more? Then click on the link and check out Open Love 101 Plus. For only $19.99 a month, you'll get exclusive content, plus these awesome features: a Facebook group where you can chat with other members of Open Love 101 Plus, Ask John and Jackie Live, where you can join our private Zoom page and ask us questions about anything, monthly webinars with influential people in the lifestyle, and discounts on our couple coaching sessions, plus much, much more. So please click on the link to find out more about Open Love 101 Plus. And we're back with Lauren. We were just talking about, Jackie, we're talking about shame and not knowing about, understanding about orgasms and things of that nature. And you've even felt some shame about our sexuality and, being in an open relationship.
In an open relationship, right. Yeah, especially. Well, I mean, it was weird. It's weird enough to even be able to embrace, your sexuality, but then to go outside, to even take it one step further and go outside societal norms of, your relationship model needs to be ABC. D, and it can't vacillate from that. So for me to then be in a relationship that's more open, that's like two strikes against me, right? So now I'm being open about my sexuality, and I'm also in a relationship which is, is giving me the opportunity to engage with other people intimately. And so that can be hard, especially if you've been raised, one, with inadequate information, and two, if you've been raised in an environment that's pretty heavily religious, or that kind of that conservative format of that kind of traditional family outline that you're supposed to be following. Mm-hmm. And it can be something kind of uncomfortable because you feel like you're bucking the system, even though internally you have a lot of comfort and joy about what it is that you're doing, but you also feel like you're kind of hitting this brick wall because you've got people pointing their finger at you and saying, what do you think you're doing? You're part of the problem in our society and not part of the solution. If you just get in line with everybody else, it'd be great. So, I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I think that's part of the struggle as, humans. We live in a culture that very much supports that individual exploration and individual identification. And, this is who I am, and this is what's true for me, and this is what I'm doing either in my personal life or my relationship. But we're also these social creatures, and closely related to the bonobos. And we have all of this social need for acceptance. And so when we go out, and if people are coupled or, in monogamous things, or even if you're single around lots of married people, you feel that separation. If you're, identify as bisexual and you're around all these people that don't identify that way, you feel that separation from the group. And we have a deep need to feel connected. So, I think we have to find the balance, and maybe, you have a different way of organizing your intimate relationship, but you can relate to them on other elements of your sexuality, or, being a woman, or being in other groups with them.
Yeah. And I think our clubs, they're private clubs that cater to people in open relationships, swingers, poly people. And
right. This is ideal.
Yeah. So what you see there is people that are of like mind, and they have the same needs and desires getting together. And there's definitely a comfort level there. And you definitely see it. Yeah. When we're at the club, you see how people interact, and it's really amazing and beautiful. But we still, mm-hmm. even with that, we see, like I mentioned earlier, women that have a lot of baggage of how they are supposed to be as a sexual person. And it mm-hmm. doesn't normally include having multiple partners, or some maybe doing some types of sexual acts. Do you encounter that with couples that you coach, or?
Yes. I mean, this is one of the biggest things that we face as women, this old, deep underlying epigenetic, coming from our ancestors' message that you're not supposed to be sexual. If you are sexual, don't be too sexual. You shouldn't really have fantasies. Men are the ones that have fantasies, and, just all of these stories that women have to overcome. And, for some women, it's very deep, and it's very hard to overcome, and they have to start masturbating and start exploring their fantasies and own these aspects of their fantasies that initially are uncomfortable for them, to be like the dirty girl or the bad girl, or, to be the seductress, or to be, whoever, to be watched, whatever turns them on. They have to discover that in masturbation and allow their erotic energy to flow. And then they can start connecting with partners in a way that's more sexually satisfying. And for some women, this kind of turns on more quickly for them if they just started masturbating early, and they have, kind of like you mentioned, we're supposed to practice sex over our lifetime. We're supposed to, like anything, you get better at it. And so when I talk to a woman that says, oh yeah, no, I didn't masturbate until college, I'm like, okay, do you have orgasms with partners? It's often no. Whereas someone who's been practicing longer, given themselves permission to have fantasies, is going to have a much more easy and pleasurable journey with sex. But I would also say that, men aren't limited in the same way, but men also have a sexual script that can really limit them in being the dominant one and having to, take sex and perform sex. So in many ways, people are limited by this performance of sex, and performing sex, though it can be fun initially to be, the big guy who, fucks the woman, or to be the seductress who, like, all of these roles we play, real pleasure that's sustainable and lasts and grows and takes you to like other levels has to come from an authentic place. And that's very different from performance-based sex. It's really knowing your body and knowing your fantasies and going into a deep place of surrender to that.
Oh, what a great point, right? There is a huge difference between the act of sex and then having sex, where you're really connecting to yourself and to your partner, and being honest about what those connections are. I think another message that is sent so often is that, when you're having intercourse with your partner and they orgasm, that you're supposed to be orgasming as well. And I think at least I know for me, I'm not orgasming through intercourse. I can, but most of it is either with a toy or my hand or, some other kind of stimulation. And if you don't understand that can be happening, you're going to think, like I did for a long time, that there was something wrong with me because I wasn't orgasming through intercourse. And I think that's another one of those lessons through sex education that is not being taught, obviously. And so then you end up with all of these women, and it can carry a few different things. One, they're going to think something's wrong with them. Two, they're not going to really enjoy sex because they're like, well, I'm not getting anything out of it. Nothing's happening to me. My partner's having a great time. And while I'm enjoying the interchange, I'm not being orgasmically satisfied. And so about even teaching that whole process, that's something I learned well into my adult years. When I
I was going to say, the full model of the clitoris it hasn't even been in textbooks. It wasn't even, there was no understanding that the clitoral head that we see externally is the tip of this huge structure inside. And, I would say that not only is it important to help women understand that, some women might never, some women, it's just, they might not always have an orgasm from penetrative sex. But if they have that first orgasm, which I love how the Taoists describe it, they describe the 3 gates of orgasm. So the external clitoris that we call, the clit, that is the first gate of orgasm. And women could have it rubbing up against you while they're fully dressed. They could have it by manual stimulation, oral stimulation, rubbing up against the penis externally, or rubbing up against the pelvis while the penis is inside. This gives them a clitoral orgasm that goes up and down and feels really intense. And then the vestibular bulbs, the crura, all the other parts of the clitoris are filling and emptying with blood. So then you have the possibility for the second gate. And that's where the penis going in stimulates the vestibular bulbs on either side, the periurethral sponge, the perineal sponge, and you have all this tissue that can fill and engorge and give you waves of pleasure. And sometimes women think they're not orgasming from vaginal sex because they think it's supposed to feel like the first orgasm, the first gate. But the second gate is actually waves that you get in touch with through making sound and becoming aware of these kind of subtle waves. And then the third gate of orgasm is the cervix. And this is a very deep surrendered place and is very, very, primitive, and you're making sounds and, you sound like a woman giving birth because, that's that same thing being stimulated. And I love Dr. Komisaruk's research at Rutgers, where he's looking at women's brains while they're having these different types of orgasms and showing how there is more cortical activity, which is the part of brain where we do our thinking, with that external orgasm. And as you move deeper into the vaginal and the cervical orgasms, the brain lights up more in the limbic and reptilian brain. And I tell this to women because I say the first step is that cortical orgasm. It's having a fantasy, it's having all those thoughts and talking dirty to your partner and all this very cortical activity. And then you kind of settle into that limbic reptilian where there's more sounds and there's not as much talking and you don't need the fantasies. It's very, you're very much in your body. But, you know, again, we have to sort of explore these steps, have all this information. Some women fall into it naturally, but most women need an education about it.
Yeah. And the permission to do it, right? Like it's okay that you do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
Well, this has been a great talk. And, you know, I really, when we sat down, I was thinking we were going to really focus on sex education in schools. But what I've realized in this is, I knew it, but we haven't really talked about it. Sex education is really missing with adults as well.
Well, we're seeing the ramifications of not having sex education in school. Now you have all these adults that are like, we don't know what's going on.
Or they think they know everything there is to know about sex, and then, you know, shame their partner for not fitting into their model, and, you know, or disappointing their partner by not expanding their repertoire or validating their experience of sexuality.
That is true.
And the other thing, Jackie, that I learned in this is that Dr. Brim has a class to help us with our sex education. Is that something that Jackie and I would be able to join? Is it something you download or?
Yeah, I have my courses on laurenbrim.com.
Okay.
And I have a sexuality for healthcare practitioners. And then I have a new one that I'm creating. That's just a college level healthy sexuality, human sexuality course that, you know, goes into a lot of things you probably work with couples on, how communication breakdowns impact sexuality, you know, just understanding so many, you know, people think, well, how much is there to learn about sex? Like there's a penis, there's a vagina. It's like, you have no idea. There is so much to understand about human sexuality. And it's a really fun journey and really healing and really validating and useful for all your relationships, whether it's your adult relationships, your friendships, how we raise our children, you know, and ultimately when we do this work, we show up better for our clients, our patients, our kids, because, you know, we're very neutral about it. We're very joyful about it. We're responsible about it. And that's what we share with people, even if we never open our mouths to talk about it specifically, it just transmits to other people.
Well, and you know, my kids are all adults now, but what I am finding is the more open I have been to myself about my sexuality and who I am, the byproduct of that is that I've been able to be more open and inviting of conversations with my adult children in their sexuality questions. And that's been pretty fantastic. Mm-hmm. You know, that they know that they can come to me and they can tell me about something that they're going through, or that they can ask a question. And I don't care how far out it is. They know that they can ask me and we're going to have that conversation. And so just even in my own life, I see the importance of why we need to be talking about this to people of all ages, and how it impacts all of us, and how it brings so much more confirmation to each individual for them to be able to embrace themselves in their authenticity, and they don't have to think that there's something wrong with them anymore, or that they're strange, or that they're doing something wrong. That they can just, you know, we can just say, yes, you know, this is who you are. You know, let's take a look at it. Let's talk about it. You know, how do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And really have that freedom there. So I am so glad that you're coming out with this course for the professionals and then for the rest of us. And you know, if we can just get, you know, I don't know how we get the schools in these states on board with realizing that the more healthy we are sexually, the healthier we'll be as a community and as a nation. You know, it's like, come on, if we can't even talk about this, you know, maybe it's time we take a closer look. So I really appreciate you being here today and talking with us about this. And I'm going to be excited to see what else you've got in store for us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And Lauren, once again, let our audience know where they can find you online and purchase your products and get your book and find your courses.
I'm at laurenbrim.com, and the Adult Playmat and my books are on Amazon, and yeah, more
And guys,
to
we'll
come.
be sure and include a link here on the podcast. Hopefully, looking forward to talking to Lauren again about some other topics. Thanks again for being with us today. And for you out there, check out openlove101.com, sign up to our email list, and we'll let you know about this video and other upcoming videos we have.
Dang, I learned a lot from that video. Subscribe, and you can learn a lot more.